Africa 54. US Vice President Kamala Harris arrived in Zambia Friday, the last stop of her week-long Africa trip. What do Zambians expect and what do they think of her visit? We'll have a report. A grand jury in New York votes to indict former US President Donald Trump on criminal charges related to a payoff to a former adult film star. We'll have reporting and analysis. And in our entertainment segment, the latest music news from around the world with Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell. These stories and much more coming up on Africa 54. US Vice President Kamala Harris is spending Friday in Zambia, the final stop of her three-nation tour of Africa, where she was warmly greeted and held talks with President Hakainde Hichilema. Now, following their meeting, the two leaders held a press conference. Kamala Harris arrived in Zambia Friday, the last stop of China her week-long Africa trip. What do Zambians expect and what do they think of her visit? We'll have a report. Her previous stop in Tanzania. A grand jury in New York votes to indict former US President Donald Trump on criminal charges related to a payoff to a former adult film star. We'll have reporting and analysis. And in our entertainment segment, the latest music news from around the world with Music Time in Africa.
The purpose of her visit to Zambia is to strengthen economic ties between Zambia and the US, and she comes at the time when Zambia is facing serious economic challenges and is in dire need of investment and economic opportunities. Kamala's visit is also seen as a move by the United States to counter the growing influence of China and Russia in Zambia, and her visit is expected to secure America's growing economic interest in Zambia. Her visit has been received with mixed feelings from many Zambians.
There is a possibility that even businesses in industry, from mining, manufacturing, and all these key sectors where we're trying to get towards to agriculture, tourism, may actually demonstrate an interest in our economy. And so there's that particular interest in that sense. But then also one of the things that I also find is very interesting is the fact that the United States government is still by far one of the biggest, in fact, if not the biggest, donor to Zambia in terms of social sectors and various areas where we have been lacking.
There's nothing much to be excited about this visit, but we can only call upon the other counterparts, that is the opposition, to continue to mount pressure on them, because we are told that this summit is actually meant to come and talk about issues of LGBT, and also we are also aware that there are other issues, security issues, that really I cannot go much into detail, but we saw how much the security detail of the Vice President has been, which has never been seen in the history of Zambia. This only goes to show that there's really something big that our colleagues have come for.
We saw what clearly happened in Ghana, and Mrs. Harris's visit to Zambia clearly has one agenda. Of course, in this summit, they won't use things like lesbian, gay, whatever. They'll use queer terminologies, but we know what the agenda is. And we are saying this is a Christian nation. This is who we are. And indeed, if it is a democratic summit, and if indeed America is really worried or really want to enhance the democracy of Africa, they should allow Africa to govern. They should allow Africa to make its own decision. They should allow Africa to guard its identity, to guard its culture.
We wouldn't want to see United States dictating to us who we should collaborate with. Russia is a sovereign state. They may have issues with Ukraine. We are a non-aligned nation. We have been part of the non-aligned movement for years, since we got independence, and that's how we were able to support countries such as China. It had to take our forefathers, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and Julius Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania, to go and stand firm.
Harris has a special connection to Zambia. This is a country where she spent most of her time with her Indian grandfather. But ahead of her visit are issues of human rights and gays and lesbians that have cropped up and have created much controversy in Zambia. These issues are a test on Zambia's relationship with the West, and how Zambia and the US will handle these issues will certainly determine the future of the relationship between Zambia and the US. Reporting for VOA News, Daniel Tonga, Lusaka.
Daniel, thank you. Now, for more on the U.S. Vice President's trip to Zambia, I'm joined by Tapiwa Ngoma. He's a business reporter with VOA's affiliate station Diamond TV, and he joins me from Lusaka. Tapiwa, warm welcome to Straight Talk Africa, to Africa 54, excuse me. I'll get straight into it. What came out of the bilateral talks between the U.S. Vice President and Zambia's President, Hakainde Hichilema? I mean, we heard Zambians there talk about reasserting their sovereignty. They don't want the United States to dictate to them. But what did the leaders actually discuss?
A lot of key areas that the Vice President of the United States of America did highlight during her speech and press briefing just a few hours ago, highlighting a few things that make it very important for Zambia to continue the relationship that was currently building with the United States of America. A few things around how they have the influence to speed up the process of our debt restructuring, and that they continue to employ the creditors that Zambia owes money to become more, and I want to phrase what she said here, in terms of providing a meaningful debt restructuring for Zambia and reducing that debt in that light. So these are some of the areas that she did touch on. Also talking about how she is on the agenda of pushing and bringing private sector investment to Zambia, something that Zambia really needs right now when it comes to improving its economy and in that regard. But also she did highlight something that was very important, a sum of about $16 million that is going to be channeled towards various programs here in Zambia.
Well, we seem to have lost connection there with Tapiwa. We'll see if we can try and come back to him a little later. That was my conversation there with Tapiwa Ngoma from VOA's affiliate station Diamond TV. We'll see if we can get back to him a little later on. Here in the United States, a New York grand jury has indicted former U.S. President Donald Trump on criminal charges related to a payoff to former adult film star Stormy Daniels. VOA's Mike O'Sullivan has the details.
The news broke late Thursday that former President Trump is being charged by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, although the specific charges remain unclear. The indictment did not come for the attack on Congress by Trump's supporters on January 6, 2021, for which Trump remains under investigation, but for a payoff to former adult film actress Stormy Daniels, who says Trump asked her to keep quiet about a sexual encounter. Former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani said the world is seeing history unfold.
This is the first time a former president has been charged with a crime. So this is unprecedented.
Trump is running again for president in 2024. He called the move political persecution and election interference in a web post. Dallas, Texas resident Mark Funk agrees the indictment is a move by Trump's enemies.
They'll try to make him seem or try to make him appear as unpopular as possible. It seems like they've been after him since he won his first election.
A New York woman, however, welcomes the indictment.
It's news that the whole nation and the whole world was waiting for, what was going to happen with this case. I think if it's justice that needs to be served, it doesn't matter who you are, justice needs to be served.
Political analyst Sherry Babich-Jeffy says the Democratic prosecutor's move could help Trump with his supporters as he seeks the Republican nomination for president. She spoke by Skype.
And they will be angry. And they will not accept the indictment. And it's still early, but if that anger continues into the primaries, they're going to come out. They're going to be the high turnout voters.
But she says the indictment will hurt Trump in the general election, costing him the votes of independent voters. And she says it leaves a blemish on the nation.
What it means to the country and what it means to the office of the presidency, neither is a winner.
The indictment will not stop Trump from running for president. and even a conviction constitutional experts say would not stop him from taking office if he won. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News.
Well, for more insight on the indictment of former U.S. President Donald Trump, let's go live now to New York, where VOA correspondent Tina Trin is standing by for us. Hello there, Tina. What can we expect in this case in coming days?
Hi, Haiti. We can expect that Trump will be traveling to New York to surrender for his arraignment, and he will officially then hear charges that will be presented to him. We know so far there are over 30 counts related to business fraud against Trump. So most definitely a historic moment. Everybody here in New York is waiting on edge to see when and where this will happen, whether he will do a public walk and surrender, whether he will be in handcuffs or not. We don't anticipate too much struggle there, although local security forces here and the police have erected multiple barricades to account for the potential of mass protests and just safety, for general safety. Lots of press just waiting to get more information at this point.
Yeah, Tina, we spoke earlier, you spoke about the 30-count indictment. Do we know anything more about the details of the charges against him?
Really, these relate back to falsification of business records in regards to that hush money payment to the adult film star Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen, who was the former fixer for Trump, is the key witness here for the prosecution and has testified that, presented information with the grand jury that he did in fact make a payment under the order of Trump. Trump has denied that he had any involvement with Stormy Daniels, but did admit to making the payment to Cohen for what he says were legal fees. And so that is false at this point, and he will have to contend with these falsification of business records.
Tina, 2 weeks ago, Mr. Trump hinted on social media, on his social media platform, Truth Social, that he expects to be arrested. Why did his legal team seem to be blindsided by this indictment?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of kind of wait and see in terms of when exactly that indictment would drop. We've seen out here in Manhattan witnesses come and go, make repeat appearances in order to testify to the grand jury, and so there was some speculation that this may not have happened, that this indictment would not go through. It's official now; it's definitely happening, and so there was no indication as to when exactly Trump's defense team would be alerted to when they would find out. Just that it probably was coming. In terms of when exactly, no information there.
Tina, thank you very much. VOA's Tina Trin there reporting for us from New York. Well, for in-depth analysis of this historic case, we say hello to David Monda. He's a professor of political science at City University of New York. Professor, what does this indictment mean for the former president's 2024 election campaign? I mean, how do his troubles now affect his own bid for the GOP nomination and that of others hoping to be the GOP nominee?
Yeah, before I answer that, I just want to make one quick point here. Even though the president has been indicted, or the former president has been indicted, that doesn't mean he's guilty. It basically means the grand jury has established that he has a case to answer, which means once the charges are opened up next week, Trump has to come forward and, respond to those charges, and the trial will be determined by a judge as to whether it will commence or whether, it will be, put aside. But to your particular question, there's two issues going on here. There's a legal process, which is this indictment, but there's the political process, which is what you've referred to in terms of the politics of this indictment. I think very broadly, in terms of the Republican base, this indictment reinforces the idea that Trump is a victim, Trump is a martyr, in terms of the whole political weaponization of the legal process, as the Republicans would put it. However, when you really look at the broader campaign in terms of a general election, when he faces Joe Biden, if he is the nominee, remember he has to win the ticket of the Republican Party. I think this indictment will be a constant irritant and a challenge for the Trump campaign, in addition to about 3 or 4 other cases. He's facing the Georgia case, the New York state tax case, of course, and then we have to wait and see whether the Department of Justice is going to indict him for the January 6th insurrection. So all these issues are there's legal questions, but there's also political questions. And it's important to divide them and separate them. But in terms of the politics, I think this indictment definitely hurts him. It's never good to carry this kind of indictment when you're trying to be president of the United States.
Absolutely. Professor, staying on the political side of things, the U.S. political system is obviously itself now in uncharted waters here. But we've seen this happen in other countries, from Europe to Asia to Africa. Of course, in the case of Jacob Zuma there in South Africa, where a former president can be brought to book or have to answer for any sort of charges against him. Is what's happening to former President Trump here a breakdown of the rule of law in the United States, or an affirmation of the rule of law? I mean, that seems to be where the discourse has landed here between Trump's critics and his supporters.
I think it's, to the latter of, of your statements, I think it reinforces the rule of law. And why do I say that? Because due process has been followed. Trump's Fifth Amendment rights have been respected in regards to habeas corpus and due process. But I think also more broadly in terms of how the legal institutions work, that a grand jury of Trump's peers has looked at the evidence from the prosecutor here in New York and has said that Trump has a case to answer. And why is that important? Because Trump is innocent until proven guilty. So he has to go to court, and this case has to be made out before a jury and a judge, and a determination has to be made as to whether he is innocent or guilty. So it definitely is a reinforcement of the legal structures because the law has been followed.
Well, we'll see what happens in coming days, of course. David Monda, thank you so much. David Monda is a professor of political science at City University of New York. In South Africa, Oscar Pistorius, the former Paralympic champion jailed in 2006 for murdering his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp, was denied parole at a Friday hearing. A lawyer for the Steenkamp family says the Department of Correctional Services said Pistorius had not completed the minimum detention period required for parole, but his parole will be considered again in 1 year. Pistorius killed Riva Steenkamp, a model, in the early hours of Valentine's Day in 2013, firing 4 times through the bathroom door of his ultra-secure Pretoria home. Well, still to come here on Africa 54, Heather Maxwell has the latest in African entertainment news. Don't go away, stay with us.
Baobab, moringa, and hibiscus are some of the main ingredients of many of the plant-based dishes on the African continent. And in the recent trends in the West of vegetarian lifestyle that focuses primarily on eating little to no meat came to no surprise to many on the continent, especially for women who are changing their eating habits to include African superfoods to resolve some of their health concerns. On the next episode of Our Voices, we'll discuss how women in the diaspora are embracing the Afro-veganism lifestyle and introduce you to some of the nutritionists who will share with you some tips and benefits of plant-based diets. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
From around the world,
Let's go.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at other news now. Danish shipper Monyasa says several members of the 16-man crew on its Liberia-flagged tanker, the Monyasa Reformer, are being held hostage by pirates who boarded then abandoned the ship last week in the West Africa's Gulf of Guinea. Crew members who were not seized are reportedly in good health and in a secure environment. Tunisia's agriculture minister says it is introducing a quota system for potable water and banning its use in agriculture until September 30th because of drought. Tunisian authorities have started cutting off drinking water at night in areas of Tunis and other cities. And Nigerian Minister of State for Petroleum, Timipre Silva, has resigned to seek a new term as governor of oil-producing Bayelsa State in the southern Niger Delta. That's according to ministry and presidency sources. Silva previously served as governor of Bayelsa between 2008 and 2012. The global response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine should act as a blueprint for addressing mass human rights violations. That's according to an annual report released Tuesday by Amnesty International. Henry Ridgewell reports for us from London.
Amnesty International says Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 unleashed military destruction on a people and country at peace.
We saw the UN General Assembly vote to condemn Russia's invasion. That was good. The International Criminal Court opened an investigation into war crimes, and Western countries opened up their borders to Ukrainian refugees. For us, these measures were really a blueprint, you could say, for how to address mass human rights violations.
Russia denies committing atrocities or targeting civilians in Ukraine, despite widespread evidence. In its annual report released Tuesday, Amnesty says the international response to the invasion exposed the double standards of many countries that condemned Russia but failed to act on other human rights crises.
Solidarity is owed to the Ukrainian people. But it is also owed to the people of Palestine, to the people of Eritrea, to the people of Myanmar. And that did not happen in 2022.
The report highlights the war in Western Tigray in Ethiopia, which has killed hundreds of thousands of people, according to some estimates. The report says 2022 was the deadliest year in a decade for Palestinians in the West Bank, with at least 151 people, including dozens of children, killed by Israeli forces. Israel claims it is targeting terrorists and says 23 of its citizens were killed in terror attacks. Amnesty also highlights Myanmar's continuing oppression of the Karen and Karenni minorities, with hundreds killed and at least 150,000 displaced. In Iran, anti-government protests erupted in September following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody. Amnesty says security forces fired live ammunition to crush the demonstrations, killing hundreds of men, women and children. Amnesty accuses China of using coercion to silence international criticism of human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims, outlined in a UN investigation.
The UN Human Rights Council failed to order follow-up action because essentially China was allowed to use its strong-arm tactics to prevent further scrutiny or accountability.
2023 is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations in the wake of World War II. In its report, Amnesty says this year must be a turning point for upholding human rights. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for our entertainment report, and joining me now is Heather Maxwell, host of VOA's Music Time in Africa radio program. Hello there, Heather. What do you have for us?
Yes, well, listen, it's time for the news out of Sweden. The 5 times Grammy winner Angelique Kidjo was one of 3 recipients of this year's Polar Music Prize. Kijo took that alongside Britain's Chris Blackwell, founder of Island Records, and Estonian composer Arvo Pärt. She's described as one of the greatest singer-songwriters in international music. The Sweden-based Polar Music Prize has been awarded since 1992 and is considered to be among the most prestigious music prizes in Europe. Two African artists, South Africa's Miriam Makeba and Senegal's Youssou N'Dour, have previously won the award. Kijo is now the third Polar Prize recipient from the African continent. Now, tragedy has struck in South Africa, where Amapiano rapper and dancer Konstantinos Sobanoglu, better known as Costa Titch, died on stage during a performance. The 28-year-old's super hit Big Flexa in 2022 catapulted him to national and international fame. On March 11th, the rising star collapsed twice while performing at the Ultra South Africa Festival in Johannesburg. The cause of death has not yet been released. Crowds gathered at his memorial, which streamed live from South Africa on March 18th. Now, finally, one of Mali's most celebrated griot family bands, Basse Kukuyate and Ngoni Ba, kicks off its 3-month world tour April 1st in the United States and then heads to Europe. Now, about 10 years ago, the band performed live here in our VOA studios on my music radio program, Music Time in Africa. We've stayed in touch and are making plans to record a new interview during this current tour. Meanwhile, let's enjoy this clip from that performance in 2013. The singer is Kuyate's wife, a greatly loved star in her own right, Ami Sako. All right, Haiti, back to you.
Heather Maxwell, thank you so much. And of course, be sure to join Heather's entertainment reports every Friday right here on Africa 54. Nice music to de-stress us at the end of the week. And that is our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, you have yourself a great weekend. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.